everybody. Welcome to Mary Wieden You. I am she. I am Mary Wieden. Let's see. Happy Friday, as people say. I'm going to start off on a sad note to tell you, first of all, about the services for Deputy Martin Shields, who was so brutally murdered last weekend. And, you know, it's still a hard thing for everybody to deal with. But tomorrow is going to be a public visitation from 9 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock in the afternoon at West Haven Funeral Home. And then from 4 to 6 p.m. will be at the funeral home's chapel. It'll be for family and friends. And then for Sunday, a celebration will be held. Celebration service, they're calling it. Must be Celebration of Life. And that's going to be at the Jackson Revival Center. And if you don't know where that is, it's 4655 Terry Road. Don't know what it's near. That's from, that starts at 2 o'clock, I think. And then at 4 o'clock is the burial at Cedarwood Memorial Park. So things for you to go to for this. And I know the sheriff is still having such a hard time of it. It's just, you know, so brutal what happened to that wonderful man. And then the other thing is about Gene Hackman, which a lot of you may not know, that he spent some time in Mississippi in 1988. He was here to film Mississippi Burning. And he was one of the FBI men who... agents who looked for the bodies. Oh, no, my phone is unavailable. I hit it 3 times. If you don't hit your code in such a little short time and take your time doing it, it'll lock up. But anyway, I think I remember most of it. So anyway, the 3 civil rights workers were murdered in Mississippi back in the day. And so there was a lot of filming around this area, a lot of the movie. And I remember hearing that they were out by the reservoir looking for the so-called location, you know, to shoot the earthen dam where they were found. That probably would have been somewhere around Fox Bay. By 1988, there was development on the North Shore, but, you know, it was very rudimentary in those days. At least North Shore Village was there, but I don't know about those other ones. But he was here for that, and he played the part of an FBI agent for that. And everybody's talking about, you know, this bizarre business about mummification of the bodies. Well, do a deep dive into mummification and you'll learn that it can happen in days, weeks, or months, depending on the weather outside and the weather inside where the bodies are. I looked that up yesterday, for heaven's sakes, to mention as we talk about our show. But today is a really big, important day that's happening for something that started 3 years ago. And to talk about that with us today is Dr. Glenn Antizzo from MC History and Politics, and it is the war in Ukraine. Might it end today? Might there be peace? Because probably President Trump is learning to say "Privyet, Volo," which means hello, Volo. His name is Volodymyr, and it's not Vladimir. It's Volodymyr, V-O-L-O. But anyway, so welcome to you, Herr Doctor. And I only know how to say "Privyet," which means hello, and "Do svidaniya," which means goodbye. Anyway, so what do you think? Is this the end of it, or what?
I really don't know.
Pages of notes you got, don't you?
Yeah, no, I did I did a lot of research to make sure that every bit of information I gave to the audience was going to be as accurate and up to date as possible. I think this may lead to a ceasefire, but I don't know if it's going to lead to a permanent peace. I personally do not trust Vladimir Putin. I think that he is being bled and he's being cashed out in the sense that he's losing a lot of troops. He's losing a lot of money. He needs a breather. I mean, if you look and you see the only way Russia is hanging in the way they are right now is because of the help they're getting from the outside. Mm-hmm. You know, they are getting they've 12,000 North Korean troops there. They're getting suicide drones from Iran. They are getting fighters from the ranks of the Houthis in Yemen and other folks that are no longer fighting in Syria now that the civil war there seems to be over and the Islamists won. So anyway, they're able to hang in there because they've got those resources available. And of course, Ukraine's been able to hang in there because they've been getting help from the West. A lot of help from us, less, but still a substantial amount from the Europeans. And it's been largely a meat grinder over there with no real movement to speak of recently.
Well, if Putin's down, why don't we strike him while he's down?
Mary, that's a great question, and I've wondered the same thing. I wondered why Trump is falling, all over himself to get this deal done, and kissing up to Putin in the way that he has. If you want to be perceived as a strong leader, and I think Trump is at the end of the day, then what you do is you tell Putin and Zelensky, this is the way it's going to be, and you dictate the terms. Don't give something so one-sided to the Russians, but for whatever reason, the rhetoric, at least so far, has been very, very, favorable to the Russian side. There's been a British newspaper leaked details of the alleged peace plan. And among them were that the Russians would hang on to the territory they captured, both, the Donetsk region and also Crimea, that the Ukrainians would withdraw from the parts of Russia they've captured. Ukraine would guarantee that they would not join NATO, and they would be permanently neutral, and they would largely disarm. And basically, I think this is asking for a Finlandization of Ukraine. If I were Zelensky, I would say that's totally acceptable and hope that I could get help from somewhere else. But
is anybody talking about actually drawing lines? Country lines, not border walls, but lines to say, okay, if you get this, there's going to be a line here where we're going to know that it's Ukraine, and we're going to know that it's not Ukraine, or don't they do that? That's too bizarre.
Well, it all depends. It all depends on who's doing the talking. I mean, there has been some suggestion that what the Russians have captured would be permanently incorporated. The Russians have already annexed it, but nobody in the world has recognized it outside of maybe a couple of small allied countries, but the international community really hasn't recognized it. And so, let me suggest an alternate solution.
Yes, please.
You recognize the reality that the Russians are on the ground, because there's really nothing that can be done about that. That they do have Donetsk. That there are a total of about 4 provinces: Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, and of course, then on top of that, Crimea. Recognize the de facto control, because there's really nothing you can do about it. But say that we're not recognizing this as a matter of international law. We are not recognizing this as permanent boundaries. Send in peacekeeping troops to separate the two sides. And that can work. We have peacekeeping troops in Cyprus separating the Turks from the Greeks. They've been there since 1974, and there hasn't been any meaningful violence between the two sides in the years since then. I think that you tell, however, the Russians that the rest of Ukraine, the other 80%, gets the security guarantees of being in NATO.
By the way, I did look up something. I wanted to know about the Mississippi connection. I kept wondering all along if there was a deal with Ukraine with grain or anything like that. What I most recently found out was that in terms of Mississippi, there were some Ukrainian refugees that came here in 2023, and they helped with tornado aftermath. So it must have been up in Rolling Fork, I guess.
Yeah.
That was only 2 years ago. It seems like
Can you believe it?
No, it seems like it was forever ago.
Yeah.
But anyway, and then earlier than that, in 2022, there were some Mississippi people up in North Mississippi who they had a sister city over there, and they did a sister city program, and they sent some things over to them to help them out. But anyway, well, what did I hear about? Something about a bunch of different soldiers from different countries, including us, being on the boundary.
Yes.
What is that?
There's a proposal on the table.
It's like what you're talking about.
Yeah, the British and the French are talking about putting a force of up to 30,000 troops in a neutral zone between the two sides. But the British especially want the United States to, not the British, the French rather, want a backup. And I understand that. I mean, they want to know that if, God forbid, the Russians try to break through, will the United States be there to help them out? And Trump has all but ruled it out. Also, what I said before about letting Ukraine into NATO, this is a quote from Donald Trump. Quote, "Ukraine can forget about NATO," unquote. Which is a reversal of longstanding U.S. policy that Ukraine was on a, quote, irreversible track, unquote, towards membership.
Yes, now that you mentioned that, I remember that. Yeah, Trump is, he doesn't want to get involved in a war over there because is this correct? When a NATO country is attacked, all its members go to help that person.
Well,
and who will they look at but us?
Well, yes, but there's something called the North Atlantic Council, and they have to approve that. For example, when we got attacked on 9/11, it's the only time that the Article 5 of the NATO treaty has been invoked. One of our allies, I believe it was Germany, invoked the treaty for us, and there was a response. That's why there was a multinational force that was with us in Afghanistan. Even the French, who don't like to deploy.
The French aren't exactly known
right.
as being soldiers and all that.
But they did come to Afghanistan with us,
Oh.
and I'm a little unclear on whether or not you would need the North Atlantic Council to invoke Article 5 in the case of Ukraine. And it sort of begs a question also. If the United States is not willing to, guarantee anything to get peace here, because really, except for mineral rights, it doesn't sound like we're really doing anything here. I don't exactly understand. Well, no, let me reverse myself. I do understand on a certain level. Trump has this idea, and I disagree with the wisdom of this, that if the United States is there helping to mine the minerals, which we definitely need, that
I got
the
a
Russians,
list of those too.
yeah, the Russians would
never
never dare to attack, and I don't buy that. I think that there needs to be a more secure guarantee, and I'll tell you why I don't buy that. Because in the past there was something called the Budapest Memorandum. In the 1990s, when the Soviet Union broke up, their nuclear weapons were on the territory of 4 different countries. Those countries were Russia, Kazakhstan, Belarus, and Ukraine. And the Budapest Memorandum was an effort to get those 3, the 3 other than Russia, disarmed. And so essentially Ukraine, as part of this agreement, gave up its nuclear weapons, and Russia, the United States, and the British gave security guarantees. And among the things that the memorandum provided for was, number 1, the independence and sovereignty of Ukraine would be recognized. Number 2, there would be a guarantee that that all parties signing this would refrain from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity and political independence of Ukraine, except for self-defense or for some other reason in accordance with the UN treaty, which, of course, what the Russians have been doing does not fit either category.
What do you we don't want that.
It forbade the use of economic sanctions to bend Ukraine's policy in favor of Russia. And it said that, if there was an issue, that the parties involved would seek the help of the UN Security Council if they were a victim of aggression or the object of some sort of aggression where nuclear weapons might be used. No, the United States, however, may have invited a violation of this. In 2013, we, the United States, used sanctions to curb human rights abuses and other violations in Belarus. And Belarus was also a signatory. The official statement, and I just looked at the statement last night, the official statement released by the State Department at that time claimed that, quote, the memorandum is not legally binding.
Oh. Okay.
So we made all these security guarantees, and the Ukrainians, I think, felt comfortable enough giving up their nuclear weapons because of the guarantees. And then we turn around a few years later,
in 2014,
right, and say, that it's it's not legally binding. So there's no reason to believe that, absent some sort of ironclad guarantees of security, that Russia would not claim, any new agreement to not be legally binding.
Well, yeah, because they took, the east side.
Right.
They like in 2014, that was under Obama, wasn't it? He let them do that.
Yeah, he let them
do it.
The Russians first took Ukraine, and then the next thing they did was try to build a land bridge between Russian territory and Ukraine so they could all be together. And there is a Russian, there is a strong ethnic Russian
Yes.
presence in those parts of the country.
Yes, because I was telling you, I met a woman who works at a store up in Madison a few months ago, and I said, "Oh, your accent, is that Russian?" She said, "Ukraine. I'm from Ukraine." I said, "Oh my goodness, how do you feel about all that, the war and everything?" She said, "Well, I have relatives in both Russia and Ukraine, so I'm in the middle of all that. So that's how they are over there, anyway. I mean, they were part of Russia for such a long time.
But,
so.
but at the same time, I mean, what if Mexico? And this is not going to be a precise analogy, but what if Mexico said that they wanted the southwestern United States?
Yeah, right.
There's a large Hispanic presence there. We feel that there's been discrimination by the United States, and therefore now we want to protect these people, and we're going to move in and try to take it over.
No, not going to happen because we are too strong for that.
No, I get that, but I'm just talking about the principle of making that kind of a claim.
Yeah.
The last time I heard a claim like this, where I wasn't alive to hear it. What worries me is that what Trump is about to embark us on is a 2025 version of the Munich Agreement in 1938. For those of you not familiar with that, in the 1930s, Hitler had already just joined Germany with Austria, so they were creating a greater Nazi Reich. And in western Czechoslovakia, there's an area called Sudetenland, and I think about 40% of the population there is German. And Hitler was claiming that the people there were being harassed and discriminated against by the Czechs, and so he said that he wanted them underneath his flag and underneath his protection. So he invited the French and the British and his buddy Mussolini to a conference in Munich, Germany. And basically the British and the French ask, look, if we give you the Sudetenland, is that it? Is that all you want? Is it over? And Hitler says yes. So the British and the French sign an agreement, and there's video that you can see on YouTube of the British Prime Minister Chamberlain holding up a document. I'm holding in my hands a document signed by Chancellor Hitler that will guarantee peace in our time.
Oh.
I'll get to the rest of the story on the other side of the break because it's got a very unhappy ending.
Ooh, okay, everybody. So this is Dr. Glenn Antizzo. Stay with us on Mary Wieden You. We'll be right back. Okay. Meanwhile, we're going to go back to the Budapest Memo that was in 1930.
We were relating the Munich Agreement to the Budapest Memorandum. So in 1938, Hitler and Mussolini and Neville Chamberlain and the French president are meeting with Hitler, and Hitler wants a piece of Czechoslovakia. And the British and the French basically ask him, if we give in to you on this demand, is that it? Is that all you want? And Hitler says yes. So they give it to him. They just hand it over. By the way, did you notice when I gave the names of the countries that were there that there was somebody missing?
Who was missing?
Czechoslovakia. It was their territory being given away.
Oh, they weren't even at the meeting.
They weren't even at the meeting.
Oh, for God's sake.
And so Hitler is given the Sudetenland, and then within a few months, he rolls into the rest of Czechoslovakia and takes it over. And since nobody stood in his way in Austria, nobody stood in his way in the Sudetenland, nobody stood in his way for the rest of Czechoslovakia, that emboldened him to finally attack Poland in September of 1939. And I feel, in a sense, that by giving this crescent of land to the Russians with pretty much no penalty at all, they were able to launch an aggressive war of conquest for 3 years, and they will be made to pay no penalty at the end of this. Matter of fact, they may end up coming out a little bit ahead, because I have no doubt, and Trump has already sort of indicated this, that not only does he want a mineral deal with the Ukrainians, he wants a mineral deal with the Russians as well. And I think that he thinks that by creating these deals, he'll bind everybody together, and then that will create the peace. I'm just skeptical of this because
look what you're dealing with.
Putin is predatory, and dangerous animals, when they get taste of blood, they want more. And I don't think that this is going to be a permanent peace. I think this is going to be a breathing space for the Russians to recuperate, rearm, refinance, and then launch the aggressive war to finish off Ukraine that they've always wanted.
And what would we do then? Would we give them the F-16s and tell them use them, or what? Or we just go, oh,
no,
Trump is he's a peacenik.
No, I think this administration. Look, there is a strain in the Republican Party that is very isolationist. That they believe that they don't like the fact that the United States has been the superpower that has been essentially the global policeman. And, I've heard people make this argument where, it's costing us a lot. It's costing us in terms of human lives. It's costing us in terms of money that could be used for American development. And why does it always have to be us? The answer is because that's the way international politics work. And it always has. There is often a hegemon, a great power that stands astride the system and is able to make life good for itself because of its position and consequently good for everybody else. If you look at the time of the Roman Empire, Rome was the great power, and Rome basically set the rules for the rest of the world, and you had the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, where there was prosperity throughout the empire, trade was able to happen, and nobody really challenged Rome. But eventually Rome falls, and Europe falls into chaos. The British were sort of like that kind of major power during the 19th and early 20th centuries. And, of course, World War II exhausted them, so then the mantle falls to us. Power abhors a vacuum. There will always be a country in that position. And if the United States voluntarily cedes this, gives it up, who is going to be the country that fills in that blank?
Well, we almost did under the previous administration.
No, and I agree. And look, I'm not. Even though I've been critical of President Trump's position on this, don't think that I'm endorsing Biden's.
Oh, no,
because Biden essentially invited this invasion.
Yeah, he said it was a minor incursion. It'd be all
if there was a minor incursion, no big deal. And then he slow walked all the aid. Yes, he gave the aid, but he slow walked it. He put conditions on how the Ukrainians could use it. You give people, medium range missiles and tell them, but don't fire them into Russia.
Yeah, really.
Look, the bases supply in the Russian war effort are a bit behind the lines. You need to take out those facilities in order to have a chance on the battlefield. But the Biden administration made a lot of bad mistakes in this respect because they seem to be playing from the Lyndon Johnson playbook of slow incremental increases. That doesn't win you a war. And unfortunately, the Ukrainians now have to live with the situation that they're in.
I will never forget Bush 41 talked about a peace dividend, and we were going to cut everything back and all that stuff. And I thought, because all the bad guys were dead, I thought, is this guy crazy? There's bad guys all over the place. We don't know who they are, but they're just waiting. They're just hiding and waiting, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And in fairness,
I don't know anything about stuff, but I know logical things, and that just never made any sense to me. But I don't mind if we have to go and do some things over there. If we're going to do it right.
Well, people have been saying that we're getting. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's right.
But people have been saying, "Oh, we're involved in this war." Really, there are no American boots on the ground. All we're doing is supplying arms. If you like Reagan, we're sort of doing writ large what Reagan was doing in the 1980s. There was something called the Reagan Doctrine. We were going to do to the Russians what the Russians had been doing to us for decades. We were looking for viable rebel groups in pro-Soviet or communist countries that could effectively challenge the regime, hopefully overthrow them, or at least defang them a little bit. And so we sent arms through the CIA to rebels in Afghanistan, rebels in Cambodia, rebels in Angola, and rebels in Nicaragua. And you know what? We have a pretty good track record there. We were able to get a withdrawal of Russian troops out of Afghanistan in 1989. That's all we wanted, and we got it. We were able to dislodge the Sandinista regime, and at least for a while, Nicaragua had a democracy thanks to American intervention. In Cambodia, eventually the Vietnamese occupation forces were forced out, although Cambodia is a bit of a basket case, so maybe it's a mixed bag on that one. In Angola, we were able to help the rebels there hold on against the communist government there, and it eventually led to a withdrawal of the 40,000 Cuban troops and 1,100 Russian advisors that were there. So, what we're doing now is basically doing the same thing, but just a little bit differently. We are giving arms to the Russians. The Reagan Doctrine was that basically
Giving arms to the Russians?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Thank you, Mary. I appreciate that. Giving arms to the Ukrainians. Yeah. The idea is, that if you want your freedom, we'll help you, but you have to fight for it. We're not putting any boots on the ground. We are even though we're spending a lot. I mean, it's not like the amount we would be spending if there were American boots on the ground, and the Ukrainians rather aren't asking us to put any boots on the ground. They're willing to take the fight themselves, but we have to give them the means to do this. And you set a really bad precedent to let the Russians overrun this place, which I think is the eventual goal. Russia may no longer be communist, but the goals are still the same. They want to bring the band back together. They want to reunite. Yes. Putin has been very open about reuniting the former Soviet Empire, but under a different looking flag, the old Russian imperial flag, which they're using today.
Well, that would take in like Estonia, Lithuania, and all those countries.
Yes, and
that's what he wants to do. And
that goes back to what you were asking me about before, because Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia are all NATO countries, and it begs the obvious question: if in fact we don't do anything to help out Ukraine, and then he gets the idea that the West won't stand up for itself, because Trump does have a point about this. The Europeans haven't been spending what they should be spending to arm themselves. Their armies are not in the shape that they were years ago. I'm not so sure that without American backing that the Europeans could hang on. And I think that if the Russians were to invade, that there is a chance that they would be modestly successful, at least in Eastern Europe. And so it begs the question. I mean, if the U.S. is willing to give in on Ukraine, does that whet their appetite to go after Europe? Would this send a signal to the Chinese that Taiwan is available for the taking?
Some people think Taiwan's going to get taken over in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, would Europe be able to depend on the U.S. if they needed to invoke the NATO treaty?
So now they're able to depend on us, but doesn't Trump want to pull a lot of us out of Europe too?
He has spoken.
We've done a lot of that already.
No. We still have bases.
We got our bases.
Yeah, no, we got bases in Germany. We got bases in Britain. I think that we have use of an airfield in Spain. I think we have a presence in the Netherlands. I know that
Germany's
we have facilities in Italy, but you're right. Germany is the big one. As a matter of fact,
Ramstein, that's a big place.
And Wiesbaden.
Wiesbaden auch.
But there was an old expression in the Cold War that NATO was there to keep the Americans in, the Russians out, and the Germans down. Oh, because at the time the worry was that in addition to a Russian invasion, what about a Fourth Reich?
Yeah, another
and as a matter of fact, there was an agreement between us and the Russians called the 2+4 Treaty, which allowed German reunification. And one of the terms that the Russians insisted on was that Americans maintain a true presence in Germany, and that was to make sure that Germany could not become what it was in the 1930s again.
Well, a guy, we had this guy came to our house a few years. Well, this was late 80s, early 90s, I guess. No, it was in the 90s. It was in the 90s from Romania. He was an official there, and he was asking Mississippi and a lot of other states, telling what it's like in Romania and how they were very nervous about the Germans.
Yeah.
They were very concerned that the Germans were going to take over Romania, but anyway, that didn't happen.
Speaking of that, by the way, our NATO allies, speaking of Romania, are getting nervous because the Russians have shot missiles that have landed in some of our allies. Romania, in particular, has had problems with Russian drones flying into their airspace. It is my understanding that the Romanian parliament is about to authorize the use of force to shoot those things down.
That's fair.
Yeah, no, it is fair. Yeah. And, it's their airspace, and they are getting nervous that they're the next on the hit parade. That the Russians have made it very clear that on the other side of Ukraine, there's a country called Moldova. The Russians have a lot of influence there. So first you take Ukraine, then you add in Moldova, and then maybe you start, rebuilding your empire in Eastern Europe.
Moldova used to be called Moldavia, if people don't remember that name. One time, Bert he used to go with the National Guard, would go around doing things, maneuvers or whatever, exercises in various countries. Like they went to Germany, and that's where you went to this store and got in this discussion trying to buy me a sweater. He was like, sweater. The ladies are like, what? And he went like this, and they said, oh, pullover. He said, yeah, pullover. So he bought me a pullover. But so one time they went to what is now Moldova, and it was really strange. The Americans were not very well received, or they were skeptically received at the airport on the tarmac. Mm-hmm. And somebody had a bicycle, and Bert said, oh, Bert was a bike rider. It's, oh, bicycle. I ride your bicycle. And so Bert, yeah, or whatever, they said, da. And so he rode the bicycle around, and that just chilled everybody out. Like, oh, okay, these people are all right. Isn't that bizarre? Anyway, we'll be back. Hey, we just got one more segment to go with Dr. Glenn Antizzo. We're going to get to what's going to happen later today, maybe. Okay, we'll be right back.
Her name is Bobby.
Bobby.
She passed March 10th, 2022, age 91 years old.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my gosh.
And it's really cool to see a picture with them side by side, because they both had the braids. I mean, identical. Exactly identical. And there's a lot of similarities, too, in the faces.
She looks like have you ever been to a Willie concert or seen it?
I have, many, many years ago.
Oh, okay. Well, you just see the back of her head. You just see the back of her head, and she's playing beautifully. Oh, Bobby, oh, yeah. Anyway, I wonder who they replaced her with. We won't talk about that. But anyway, so Bobby will not be at the concert. But anyway, so back with Dr. Glenn Antizzo, our final segment, talking about, here we go, with Ukraine. And so, by the way, Volodymyr is in the United States now. He's arrived in this country, and then sometime later on they'll have their discussions, I guess. Mm-hmm. Did you want to hit on rare minerals? Because people are like, well, what are rare minerals? What does that mean? Because I do have this a little collection of rare minerals, and anybody can find them. You just go look them up. Did you look any of them up?
No, I did not.
Oh, I was going to say, I also did a very shallow dive into it. Apparently, how you get them is layers of Earth evolution is where some of the stuff comes from. And, it's not like there's a little pocket of stuff over there with all these good things in there, diamonds and rubies. No, it's nothing like that at all. They're just sort of scattered around. I don't know how anybody knows where to find them, but most of them are in China. And then there are others, collections in Russia.
Right.
But how you know exactly where they are, I don't know. I don't think you go around with a divining rod and find out. Just don't know what you do, but these are things like, what is scadium? Well, it's a light aluminum alloy for aerospace components, additive in mercury vapor lamps. Well, that's valuable. You see, there are 17 main ones. They have a number, a symbol, a chemical,
right? An
symbol.
Elemental symbol.
Yep.
Periodic table.
Yes, and then there's one called yttrium, and that has a lot of stuff, including microwave filters. Energy efficient light bulbs is what that stuff's for. The stuff like that. Oddball thing. Well, lanthanum, high reflective index glass, flint, hydrogen storage, battery electrodes, camera lenses, lanthanum or something. Lanthanum. Camera lenses, fluid catalytic cracking catalyst for oil refineries. Okay. Here's one. Promethium. Sounds like Prometheus, but it's promethium. Right. Is for nuclear batteries. Okay. Then samarium is rare earth magnets, lasers, neutron capture, and masers. M-A-S-E-R. Not lasers, masers. Whatever that is, I don't know. But, I mean, there's a whole list of them. There are 17 of them. Holmium is for lasers. Erbidium is for infrared lasers or chemical reducing agent, whatever that means. I don't know what that means, but anyway, you can find this stuff online. That's some of the rare earth minerals that we're looking for to protect and to mine and to have, and so that's what we want there.
A lot of the high tech stuff we do relies on things like your cell phone or lithium batteries or stuff.
Yeah, there was something in there about and screens, camera screens, and stuff like that. So we want that. And by the way, is there anything about rebuilding? This is what Russia should be made to do: is rebuild Ukraine. They've destroyed it. I think they've left the Capitol buildings intact, mostly, right? But everything else is destroyed. Beautiful antiquities and et cetera. Is anybody thinking about that as a condition for this peace or whatever we're talking about here?
I have not heard any suggestion of it.
I mean, because there's nothing to go home to for those poor people.
It's too bad also because right after the election, I did have a lot of hope that maybe there would be a favorable peace here. I don't know if you remember this, but shortly after the election.
Our election?
Yeah. That Trump essentially contacted the Russians and told Putin directly not to escalate the war because, and this is a quote, because I have weapons too.
Ooh.
And this is the type of strength that the leader of the free world needs to project. In my opinion.
I agree.
But really, until today, he hasn't been talking much to Zelensky. He did talk to the Russians in Saudi Arabia. The Ukrainians weren't invited. This week, he's already had his people have already had a 6-hour-long meeting in Turkey. And, Ukraine has sort of been sidelined by this.
They've been stepped on all along, it seems like. Sure, we gave them stuff, but like you point out, but don't use it. Years ago, Obama gave them blankets. I remember that. Gave those people blankets. They're getting that was when they're doing the eastern side, that kind of stuff. And then now they're being asked to just keep still. Just take what you have and just keep still about it.
Right.
Essentially.
Well, again, we're the superpower here. Russia is a second-tier power at the moment, this has really bled them. Trump, I believe, is in a position of advantage. Russia is drained. I think Trump can set the terms if he wants to, and the Russians would have to comply. I think he's holding the cards, and I don't know why you would give them up to the Russians.
I don't get that either. Who do you think is the strongest one in the administration to kind of steer this besides Trump? Rubio, Marco Rubio, would he be a strong guy?
I think he would. But this is one of the reasons I had problems with Vance being asked to be vice president, is that Vance has also been a bit of a neo-isolationist when it comes to stuff like this. I think Rubio has had a good track record of standing up to the Russians. A lot of it, I'm sure, has to do with the fact that he's Cuban. His family is here because of, stuff that had happened. Right, exactly. Yeah. So, but the question is, how much is he going to be able to do? You have strong secretaries of state who have a lot of input into American foreign policy, and then others that are essentially just messengers for whatever the president is saying. And of course, at the end of the day, it is the president who's going to make the decisions. But I'd like to think that Rubio's got his ear. If I would hate to think that Rubio is a State Department version of who was the guy? The guy from Alabama that was the Attorney General.
Oh, yeah.
Who ended up getting fired. I'd hate to think that. I really hope Rubio's got some input here.
Yeah. About Jeff Sessions?
Yes. Thank you. Yes. That's why I love having you here, because you are always coming through in the clutch. Scholars at the Council on Foreign Relations believe that Trump is trying to reset and normalize relations with Russia, and that Ukraine is being sacrificed to achieve that goal. But of course, it begs the obvious question. What is in it for the Americans? What is it that we're getting from the Russians out of all of this?
If we could get peace and quiet would be one thing. It would be pretty good.
Russia is not being asked to make any concessions. And there's a real fear that in addition to giving up Ukraine, that we're going to be weakening our influence in Europe without getting anything in return for it. So,
like I said in the break, for God's sakes, why can't people just stay in their own lanes and just be quiet? Develop your own countries. Okay, the Romanians are trying to develop their country. Russia is not exactly the best place in the world to be, but, you can make something out of it, I suppose, if you try. If you don't go blowing everything else up, just leave people alone.
Yeah.
They don't have to be isolationists, but, you can get along without getting in people's heads and faces and everything else.
Well, the sad thing is
we don't do that, though. We're humans, right?
No, the sad thing is that there was a window of opportunity for exactly what you suggest. When communism got toppled in Russia in 1991, there was a very democratic, sort of Western-looking president named Boris Yeltsin. Now, Yeltsin was a bit of an alcoholic and did have some problems, but the fact of the matter is he was pro-U.S. He worked with us on a number of things. He began to edge away from the United States, not because I think that he disliked us, but rather because he was being pressured by his right in Russia. Hey, why are you so in bed with the Americans? Why, you're turning into, Clinton's lapdog or whatever. And And it's a shame because once he left, you at the time the Russian Constitution was you only got 2 terms as president, and the guy who succeeded him was was Vladimir Putin.
Oh,
and Putin did his 2 terms, but even then was starting to consolidate his power. After his 2 terms were up, he has a guy, basically his sock puppet named, good Lord, Medvedev.
Oh yeah, Medvedev.
You may remember
Medvedev.
He was the guy that when Obama was president, Obama leans over to him, hey, let.
Oh, I'm going to get my second term.
Wait till the election's over, and then I'll be able to do whatever I want with you. Oh, that's all right. I will tell Vladimir that we will be, hearing from you, or whatever it was that he said. Thank you. I don't do many things well. I think I do a decent Clinton. My students yesterday told me I had a decent Jimmy Carter.
You do,
but no, I don't. I don't do too many things too well.
Let's hear Jimmy. Let's hear Bill Clinton. How's your Bill Clinton?
Well, Mary, let me just tell you right now that this has been an honor sitting here in the studio with you.
That's good.
Thank you.
That's really well done. Yeah.
Thank
I don't do people except for, I used to do like out cues. And I remember so well that Andrea Mitchell used to say, Andrea Mitchell, NBC News, Washington. But that's the way she said it, not so much the vocal quality.
Right.
And I could do Rosanna Dana. Do you remember Rosanna Dana?
Oh my God, yeah. Matter of fact, she was modeled after a reporter in New York named Roseanne Scammadella.
Yes, who's still there, I think. And Rosanna Dana's grandmother was Nana Rosanna Dana, and she made bandanas. Well, you know what? Let's see. Good night, my little Rosanna Dana, and good night to you too, Professor. Thanks an awful lot, everybody, Professor.
Thank you, Mary.
Antizzo. And we'll be back to talk about whatever happens in New York. All right, in D.C. Woo. It's time to do yard work this weekend. Murdering some myrtles. Boy, that'll be fun. All right, everybody. See you next week.